What is the fun criterion? My question really is, whenever you give this advice of, oh, what should I do? You should follow the fun, it seems like you're saying something epistemological instead of just like, this is David's life advice.
Yes, well, far be it from me to give life advice. That would be terrifying. But the fun criterion is epistemological, yes. We'll start out by recognizing that there are many more kinds of ideas in the mind than sort of are recognized in everyday speech or were recognized by traditional philosophy. We don't just have, for example, beliefs and emotions. We have a complex menagerie of ideas in our mind which interact with each other and which are all many of them are absolutely necessary for thinking and for solving problems, creating knowledge. In particular, the categories, three categories that are very important are the explicit ideas, that is the ones that can be expressed in a language, ordinary language like English. And then there are the inexplicit ideas which can't be expressed in language, like, for example, when you're playing tennis and the ball is heading towards you and you're thinking, oh, it's going to go out now. No, it isn't. I better run for it, that kind of thing. The words "it's going to go out now" do not appear anywhere in your mind while you're doing that. And yet it is knowledge that you're creating. You're creating a theory about where the ball's going to strike. Then you're correcting the theory and you're doing all the things that error-correcting thinking does without expressing it in sentences or words. So that's inexplicit thinking, and you're using inexplicit knowledge. There's also, but it's conscious. You are conscious that something is happening there, and if you were asked afterwards, what were you thinking? Then you might say, I thought it was going to land in this place, but it actually landed in that place. There's also unconscious, where in no sense are you aware of thinking or knowledge there.
But it's still going on.
But it's still going on, and it's necessary. These categories are approximate, and one important thing is that explicit ideas always have a large inexplicit component. My favorite example is grammar. So we speak according to the rules of grammar, but if you're asked what they are, you either don't know them or you think you know them, and then somebody tells you a sentence which meets your stated criterion and you know that it's wrong. So we have inexplicit ideas regulating our speech, our explicit speech. If we want to recognize that all these different kinds of ideas, and that's just only three major ones I mentioned, if they all contribute to the growth of knowledge, then we have to apply, if we're Popperians, we have to apply the same theory of knowledge to all of them. For example, none of them are ever justified. All of them can be mistaken. All of them we expect generically to be mistaken. All of them are corrected by a process of problem solving with conjecture and criticism. All that sort of thing applies to all the different kinds of knowledge. And as I just said, they are all needed. They all participate actually in any significant kind of thinking. When we have a problem, when something goes wrong, it may in general be, and we try to identify what the ideas are that are conflicting with each other that constitute the problem. It may be that the explicit theory that we recognize as part of the problem, one of the explicit theories is actually false. Like we think, how come it was so tiring to go to the post office? Well, actually, the post office, you think the post office is nearby, but that's an illusion. It's actually quite a long way away. So that would be a rare example, maybe unrealistically rare, of you having an explicit theory that conflicted with another explicit theory, and one of them was false and the other one was true, and you can realize that by criticism. But more often, there are more theories than that involved, more ideas than that involved, and some of them will be inexplicit and some of them will be unconscious. Now
You said theories and then you corrected it to ideas. Is that because people don't think of emotions as theories?
Yes,
that you do?
there is no good terminology that expresses this unified concept of all the entities that are interacting in a mind. Maybe because of the history of how I came to these ideas, I tend to call them theories in my own mind. But I think ideas is perhaps a broader category for most people. It's more natural.
But there's also desires and feelings.
So these ideas include desires and feelings and all sorts of things that don't have names and so on. It's just everything that can affect one's thought processes, whether you know about it or not, and so on. So it could be that the reason that you have this problem is not any of the explicit theories that you think are part of it, even if you were perfectly accurate about what the explicit theories in conflict are. The problem will in general include actually inexplicit and unconscious theories. And there, the tactic of trying to criticize one of them is not really enough, because you don't know what it is. You don't know what the inexplicit theory is, and if you do have an idea of what it is, you can't express it in language, therefore it's harder to criticize. If it's unconscious, you definitely don't know what it is. So, for example, take the tennis example. You seem puzzled by that. Where it's a matter of where will the ball land, you can kind of synthesize what your theory must have been. You know, if you then hit it wrong and you're analyzing afterwards, why did I hit it wrong? Well, because I thought it wasn't spinning and it was. You know that. So you've converted your inexplicit ideas into explicit ones. Then you can criticize them. But you might not. You might be wrong about what it was. You might be wrong about what your inexplicit theory was. And even worse, if it's unconscious, then you can't even conjecture like that. If it's an unconscious theory about things like what it means to you to win and how important it is to look good and that kind of thing, which are not, you're not consciously aware of, but they might be affecting you. They might be affecting your criteria. Then you don't know what they are, and then it's absolutely impossible. Well, no, it's not absolutely impossible. You can always think about it and work out what it must have been, just like with the inexplicit theories, but it's much harder, shall we say. And then you have to, supposing you're in a situation where you are faced with a decision, and you want to make a decision, even if it's only a temporary decision. What shall I do until I've solved this, or whatever? Then you have to find a way of a criterion for when there is a conflict. When it's two explicit theories, it's obvious or fairly obvious when there is a conflict. When it's an inexplicit theory, it's harder. When there's an unconscious theory in conflict with explicit theories, or two unconscious theories, or five of them, all in conflict with each other, then it affects you by via. I don't think there's a satisfactory word for it, but it affects you via your feelings. It affects you via your mood. It affects you via things that can't be easily stated in words, but they can be felt. So you think you want to go down to the post office, and your unconscious theory knows very well it's a long way away, but your conscious theory thinks it's just around the corner, and you feel a reluctance to go. and that reluctance is one of these things. It's a feeling. It's a mood. Now. So there's a conflict. How do you know there's a conflict? Well, you have a mood.
Yeah. But then, like, so if you've got a bunch of different unconscious theories and inexplicit theories, and they all say to do different things, perhaps.
Yes.
What determines which one wins?
That's where the Fun Criterion comes in, because you can imagine several different kinds of criteria that one might use, and several very widespread criteria, several criteria are in common use, and they are irrational or anti-rational in Popper's and my sense, respectively. So a common criterion is to try to disregard everything but your explicit theories. You say, for example, this is beginning to feel bad, but I have worked out, or my self-help book says, or my exercise guide says, or my trainer says, no pain, no gain, and so ignore the pain. Of course, I'm referring to psychological pain. Ignore the psychological pain. Just do the thing. Which thing? Well, it's always the thing designated by your explicit theory, according to that. And that's just a mechanical criterion for choosing between theories, and therefore is irrational. Theories have to be judged by content, not by where they came from or any attributes of theirs that aren't content. So another theory, kind of opposite of that theory, is what you might call the romantic stance, which is to say explicit ideas are just conventional decoration. They're not really human, they don't really mean anything. What's really important is feelings. And so what you do if you adopt that idea is you try to reach into your feelings and follow them. Now, this, of course, it's impossible. So first of all, it's irrational because, again, it's just like the other theory of following your explicit theories. It's just choosing between theories according to an irrelevant criterion, compulsively.
Why is that irrelevant?
Because it doesn't look at the content. It only looks at the type of theory or the origin of the theory.
You mean choosing feelings over something else just says, oh, feelings are good, and then it doesn't look at what the feelings actually say.
Yes. So so that is irrational for I mean, it's overtly irrational. But there's also the problem, just like with explicit theories, but more intense, that you cannot actually act on your feelings unless you have an idea of what they are, and you may be mistaken. So you
don't need an explicit idea about what they are.
You do, because you might have a feeling that something is going wrong, but that doesn't tell you what to do.
But you don't need an explicit theory of what to do. You can just kind of do without thinking in an explicit way. You can just kind of follow your intuitions. You might need a conscious theory, but you don't need an explicit one.
Well, you need a conscious theory, but so supposing you're doing a thing, you're going to the post office, and suddenly a nameless dread comes over you. So you might say, okay, well, in that case, do whatever doesn't cause the nameless dread. Well, you don't know. You might turn around and start going back home, and the dread gets worse. You need a theory. As soon as you are instructing your legs to move in one direction rather than another, you have, as soon as you've deliberated and caused your legs to do one thing rather than another, you have an explicit theory.
You can do deliberation via intuition.
Okay, well, at the very least, it's very close to the borderline of explicit, because if someone asks you, what have you decided to do? You'll say, I've decided to turn around. The point is, you need some knowledge. It's not enough to see that there's a problem, because there's an infinite number of things you might do when you feel the nameless dread going to the post office. So that means that you've got to create new knowledge in an area where inexplicit or unconscious theories are conflicting with explicit ones. You have all sorts of theories, all sorts of ideas, which are in conflict in your mind. To solve this, you need conjecture, criticism, error correction in order to solve the problem. And in general, you need to create new knowledge. And how do you do that if you can't translate the theories into the same language, into either the explicit, the inexplicit, or the unconscious language? How do you do that? And how do you know when you've done it? Well, you know when you've solved it, because you no longer feel nameless dread. I mean, you might not have solved it completely, but at least you've solved the immediate problem. So you would have to do some unconscious conjecture and some inexplicit conjecture, as well as some explicit conjecture, and the same for criticism, all of them. So how do you cross this boundary line between these areas of knowledge that it is difficult, or perhaps in practice impossible, at least in the time, to translate between? Well, I think the answer is, and this is going to be true even of purely explicit problems, because they never are purely explicit. The answer is that at some level, all these processes are evolution. They're all a bunch of ideas evolving in some environment. And like in biology, the environment consists largely of other ideas. But in the mind, in genes, there is only one kind of idea, which is the gene. And but in the human mind, there are lots of different kinds of ideas, and they're not intertranslatable, but they are all evolving in the environment of the others. And therefore, what is happening when things are going well is that there's conjecture and criticism, but the conjecture and criticism in each of these areas is taking account of what the others are doing, or at least what the others are. So just as a simple example, I'm not sure if I can think of all 6 possibilities, but if you make explicit criticisms of your explicit ideas, you will have not only the usual explicit criteria of, does this make sense? Does it seem to solve the problem? Is it logically consistent? Is it consistent with my other theories? And so on. You'll have all those things, but you'll also have, do I still feel the nameless dread? And so that's making explicit whether you think there's a problem. You may be wrong, as always. The nameless dread may not be any of the things you're thinking, and the same is true at the inexplicit and the unconscious level. That they can all take each other into account, even if they can't be directly criticized by each other, or translated into each other, or directly brought into confrontation. The explicit ideas can be directly brought into a confrontation by things like logic and by experiment. But in general, ideas affect each other by evolution. So you want to get, ideally, you want to get into a state of mind where they're all affecting each other. And when they're all affecting each other, you are having fun.